The first published mathematical study of the possibility of an artificial satellite was Newton's cannonball, a thought experiment by Isaac Newton to explain the motion of natural satellites, in his Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, 1687. The first fictional depiction of a satellite being launched into orbit was a short story by Edward Everett Hale, The Brick Moon, 1869. 4. The idea surfaced again in Jules Verne's The Begum's Fortune, 1879. In 1903, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, 1857–1935, published Exploring Space Using Jet Propulsion Devices, which is the first academic treatise on the use of rocketry to launch spacecraft. He calculated the orbital speed required for a minimal orbit, and that a multi-stage rocket fueled by liquid propellants could achieve this. In 1928, Hermann Potočnik, 1892–1929, published his sole book, The Problem of Space Travel, The Rocket Motor. He described the use of orbiting spacecraft for observation of the ground and described how the special conditions of space could be useful for scientific experiments. In a 1945 Wireless World article, the English science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke described in detail the possible use of communications satellites for mass communications. 5. He suggested that 3 geostationary satellites would provide coverage over the entire planet. In 1946, the United States Air Force's Project RAND released the preliminary design of an experimental world-circling spaceship, which stated that a satellite vehicle with appropriate instrumentation can be expected to be one of the most potent scientific tools of the 20th century. 6. The United States had been considering launching orbital satellites since 1945 under the Bureau of Aeronautics of the United States Navy. Project RAND eventually released the report, but considered the satellite to be a tool for science, politics, and propaganda, rather than a potential military weapon. 7. In 1946, American theoretical astrophysicist Lyman Spitzer proposed an orbiting space telescope. 8. In February 1954, Project RAND released Scientific Uses for a Satellite Vehicle, written by R. Carhart. 9. This expanded on potential scientific uses for satellite vehicles and was followed in June 1955 with The Scientific Use of an Artificial Satellite, by H. K. Coleman and W. W. Kellogg. 10. In the context of activities planned for the International Geophysical Year, 1957–58, the White House announced on 29 July 1955 that the U.S. intended to launch satellites by the spring of 1958. This became known as Project Vanguard. On 31 July, the Soviets announced that they intended to launch a satellite by the fall of 1957. The first artificial satellite was Sputnik 1, launched by the Soviet Union on 4 October 1957 under the Sputnik program, with Sergei Korolyov as chief designer. Sputnik 1 helped to identify the density of high atmospheric layers through measurement of its orbital change and provided data on radio signal distribution in the ionosphere. The unanticipated announcement of Sputnik 1's success precipitated the Sputnik crisis in the United States and ignited the so-called space race within the Cold War. launched on 3 November 1957 and carried the first living passenger into orbit, a dog named Laika. 11. In early 1955, following pressure by the American Rocket Society, the National Science Foundation, and the International Geophysical Year, the Army and Navy were working on Project Orbiter with two competing programs. The Army used the Jupiter C rocket, while the civilian Navy program used the Vanguard rocket to launch a satellite. Explorer 1 became the United States' first artificial satellite on 31 January 1958. 12. In June 1961, 3.5 years after the launch of Sputnik 1, the United States Space Surveillance Network catalogued 115 Earth-orbiting satellites. 13. Satellites were constructed to unique designs. With advancements in technology, multiple satellites began to be built on single model platforms called satellite buses. The first standardized satellite bus design was the HS-333 geosynchronous (GEO) communication satellite launched in 1972. Beginning in 1997, Free Flyer is a commercial off-the-shelf software application for satellite mission analysis, design and operations. Currently the largest artificial satellite ever is the International Space Station. 14. Tracking main article. Ground station further information. Orbit determination, satellite geodesy section satellite tracking, and satellite flare see also. Space debris section tracking and measurement, and satellite tracking. Animal migration. Satellites can be tracked from Earth stations and also from other satellites. Space Surveillance Network main article. United States Space Surveillance Network. The United States Space Surveillance Network, SSN, a division of the United States Strategic Command, has been tracking objects in Earth's orbit since 1957 when the Soviet Union opened the space age with the launch of Sputnik I. Since then, the SSN has tracked more than 26,000 objects. The SSN currently tracks more than 8,000 artificial orbiting objects. The rest have re-entered Earth's atmosphere and disintegrated, or survived re-entry and impacted the Earth. The SSN tracks objects that are 10 centimeters in diameter or larger. Those now orbiting Earth range from satellites weighing several tons to pieces of spent rocket bodies weighing only 10 pounds. About 7% are operational satellites, i.e. approximately 560 satellites. The rest are space debris. Astronomical satellites are satellites used for observation of distant planets, galaxies, and other outer space objects. Space telescope. Biosatellites are satellites designed to carry living organisms, generally for scientific experimentation. Communication satellites are satellites stationed in space for the purpose of telecommunications. Modern communication satellites typically use geosynchronous orbits, Molniya orbits or low Earth orbits. Earth observation satellites are satellites intended for non-military uses such as environmental monitoring, meteorology, map-making etc. See especially Earth Observing System. Navigational satellites are satellites that use radio time signals transmitted to an